I finally found something to watch that has a main character who reminds me of DCI John Luther. He's Francisco Juanez from the Netflix original film Intuition. He's a really smart detective who rides the line between following the law and breaking it. So should this Argentinian crime drama be on your watch list? A newbie cop is partnered with a seasoned detective to solve a socialite's murder, but she also finds herself investigating her partner for a revenge killing. Now, this drama is at times a slow burn. I mean, it does take its time to unravel the clues, just making us try and figure out what's going on. Our two main characters, Juanez and Pipa, are both off-putting and charismatic throughout the film. Now, I know that is counterintuitive and even contradictory, but neither one of them is always likable, but they're also not always despicable. I mean, they fluctuate through their appeal just like pretty much any regular person would. Now, I really like Juanez and how he's brooding at times. I mean, he is a thinker, and he also has a slight air of arrogance to him. I mean, he knows that he is the smartest one in the room a lot of the time. And while that's not always an endearing trait, it works in this show because you have to have an air of suspicion around him. I mean, you have to kind of not like him. You have to think something's a little off with him. You have to have some kind of doubt with him or just not be in total love with him. Otherwise, the mystery of him being investigated, that whole storyline, it just completely falls apart. Pippa is great because she's inquisitive, but she's also super intelligent and deductive. She's also a thinker, but she is so interested in the truth that she is willing to go through all of the steps. She doesn't want to jump to conclusions in order to mess with the facts. Now, as much as I like the main characters, I don't think that the storylines had a lot of meat to them. There's not a great deal of development that goes into the storyline of the murdered socialite. I mean, we get some context and it is semi-interesting, but there doesn't seem to be an urgency to solving this crime, or at least the way that it translates off the screen to me as the viewer. Now, the detectives, of course, they have thoughts of who the perpetrator is, and they investigate accordingly, but there's not any tension or suspense that's built because I don't ever feel like they're up against a ticking clock. I don't get the sense that there is a driving force for them to solve this crime in a timely manner. And the same goes for the internal investigation. I mean, there is some real depth to the story that could be examined. All throughout it, it stays pretty surface level. You have a family of the victim who is kind of questionable, and so there's an avenue in that to develop and to examine. Then there's also the whole motive of why this person would have been killed for revenge, and to really dive into that more and how that shapes one of the characters. I think they missed a lot of opportunity for some really good misdirection, especially where the family is involved, because like I said, they all have questionable backgrounds, and so you could really play with that to really screw with the audience, to make us have a lot of self-doubt when it comes to things. Now, there is a little bit of misdirection that goes in this. I mean, I did second guess myself a little bit, but never to the degree where I was on the edge of my seat. I guess it just didn't grab me the way that I was hoping it could. Now, the movie itself is just under 2 hours, and for the most part, it moved along nicely, except when we get to the end, and that's where I feel that it dragged a bit, because it's now showing us information and pieces that I'm pretty sure all of us have already put together. It's just confirming small things that I think the audience give us enough credit that we already understand what happened. You showed us some things, and now you're spelling it out just blatantly. And I don't think it needed that. And that's what I think really made the very end of the film kind of drag for me, because it was obvious at this point. This isn't a bad movie or even a boring one. It just suffers from a strong lack of suspense. The seriousness of the crimes didn't evoke any tension in the story, and so then it didn't evoke any tension in me either. Mainly, this is a forgettable film. I mean, it is worth watching at some point, but it's not something that you need to rush right over and sit down and watch. And I do like the characters though, and so I would really like to see more of them together in something. There's no sex, but there is nudity, a bunch of profanity, and some really graphic violence. I give Intuition 3 out of 5 couches. So what's a really good detective movie that you've seen recently? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for catching with me.